It's Plymouth Art Weekend 2016 and I'm at the Athenium Theatre in Plymouth. This is Lorna Rose, community worker, reading extracts from Sisters of Yam. Thanks to Lorna Rose.
So Lorna is a community worker, and to every person who perform here or to participate, we always ask them before they start what feminism means to them. So Lorna.
So when I was thinking about what feminism means to me, I had a whole host of ideas and thoughts about what it means to me. And I kind of narrowed it down to a short list of things. And for me, it's about feeling, it's about being heard, it's about being respected regardless of my view. It's about unity and strength and coming out of the shadows with other women. It's about being true to myself and being unapologetically me, but also fighting for a time when what I think and what I say is more important than what I look like or people's perceptions of me.
Thank you. So we start with you.
Okay. So my initial responses to being asked to present today were to have a kind of internal monologue about all the things I'm not. And it went something like this. I'm not an artist, a creative person, someone with anything to say that needs hearing, a person of notoriety, a scholar or an expert, or a natural presenter. And so once I'd exhausted that list, I then had to start thinking about the things that I am. And this led me to think of that I am a woman, I'm a black woman with a voice, an opinion, knowledge, experience, my own truth, and some fleeting courage. And it's the fleeting courage that means I'm sitting in front of you today. I want to share with you, I've chosen to share with you some extracts from a book that somebody introduced to me many years ago called Sisters of the Yam. It's about black women and self-recovery, and it's by Bell Hooks. And it particularly resonates for me, my life, so I thought I would share it with you today. So Bell Hooks is a black American feminist writer, and it's a self-help book written from an American political perspective, but it is relevant to the lives of many black women. Bell explores the self-recovery of black women without ignoring the impact of race, class, gender, sexuality, and thus acknowledges that the recovery is not just about our own internal will. It was difficult to decide which extracts to share with you, as I found myself confronted with revealing experiences of black women which are often left unspoken. The book is not solely for black women, but it's for anyone who wishes to understand the construction of self and identity of black women. In the book, Bell examines how the emotional health of black women is wounded by the daily assaults of racism and sexism, through exploring issues such as beauty, trauma and addiction. She explores numerous strategies for self-recovery. In explaining the origins of the book's title, Sisters of the Yam, Hooks talks about support from elders and how this historically has provided healing for black women. She talks of grieving for the current generation of women who, in her words, seem so modern, so sophisticated and so lost. She goes on to say, I thought we should call our support group Sisters of the Yam. I felt the yam was a life-sustaining symbol of black kinship and community. Everywhere black women live in the world, we eat yam. It is a symbol of our diasporic connections. Yams provide nourishment for the body as food, yet they are also used medicinally to heal the body. The groups were about black women having a space to come together to name their pain and find their ways of healing. The next extract is from a chapter about truth-telling and opens with a quote from Audre Lorde, Eye to Eye, Sister Outsider, who speaks of our need to be gentle with ourselves and others. She writes, we have to consciously study how to be tender with each other until it becomes a habit, because what was native has been stolen from us, the love of black women for each other. But we can practice being gentle with each other by being gentle with that piece of ourselves that is hardest to hold, by giving more to the brave, bruised girl child within each of us, by expecting a little less from her gargantuan efforts to excel. We can love her light as well as in the darkness, quiet her frenzy towards perfection, and encourage her attention towards fulfillment. As we arm ourselves with ourselves and each other, we can stand toe-to-toe inside that rigorous loving and begin to speak the impossible, or what has always seemed like the impossible, to one another. The first step towards genuine change. Eventually, if we speak the truth to each other, it will become unavoidable to ourselves. Hooks continues, healing takes place within us as we speak the truth of our lives. Commitment to truth-telling is thus the first step in any process of self-recovery. A culture of domination is necessarily a culture where lying is an acceptable social norm, and in fact it is required. White folks knew that they were lying about African slaves who laboured from sun-up to sundown when they told the world that those same slaves were lazy. White supremacy has always relied upon a structure of deceit to perpetuate degrading racial stereotypes, myths that black people were inferior, more animalistic. Within the colonising process, black people were socialised to believe that survival was only possible if they learned how to deceive. And indeed, this was often the case. She goes on to say, many of the survival strategies that were once useful to black people, like dissimulation, concealing our thoughts and feelings, are no longer appropriate to the lives that we're living now, and therefore do us grave harm. She moves on from talking about truth-telling to talking about stress in black women's lives. If we examine the history of black women and work in this society, it clearly shows that we've been mostly employed in arduous, back-breaking jobs where we were forced to push ourselves way past normal limits, then return home to the second shift, that is housework and childcare. Let us not forget that slavery was one ongoing work-until-you-drop system. The point I want to make is that black women are so well socialised to push ourselves past healthy limits that we often do not know how to set protective boundaries that would eliminate certain forms of stress in our lives. This problem cuts across class. What's going on when professional black women who slave all day on the job come home and work some more? Rarely are the statistics on heart disease, depression, ulcers and addiction broken down by class, so that we might see that black women who have are nearly as afflicted by these stress-related illnesses as those who have not. In a society that socialises everyone to believe that black women were put on this earth to be little worker bees who never stop, it is not surprising that we too have trouble calling a halt. She goes on to say, when my 5 sisters and I left home, one of the first things we noticed about Mum was how she never stopped working. She was continuing a pattern set by her mother, who spent a lifetime getting up at the crack of dawn to begin the day's work. In part, these generations of southern black people were so desperate to let the racist white world know that they were not lazy, that they were compulsive about work. Had not slavery socialised the generations before them to be compulsive about work? The compulsive need we see in our mum to always be busy is disturbing, and yet many of us have adopted a similar life pattern. We do not know when to quit. Knowing when to quit is linked to one's value. If black women have not learned to value our bodies, then we cannot respond fully to endangering them by undue stress. Unless black women begin to make our health and well-being a central priority, we cannot begin to develop lifestyles that enhance our lives. Throughout the book, Hooks draws upon quotes and extracts from other authors, and one that resonates particularly with me is by a woman called Leonetta McLean from The Middle Class Black's Burden. She says, "I'm burdened daily with showing whites that blacks are people. I am, in the old vernacular, a credit to my race. I am my brother's keeper and my sister's. Though many of them have abandoned me because they think I have abandoned them. I run a gauntlet between two worlds, and I am cursed and blessed by both. I travel, observe and take part in both. I can also be used by both. I am a rope in a tug of war. If I am a token in my downtime office, so am I at my cousin's church tea. I assuage white guilt, I disprove black inadequacy, and prove to my parents' generation that their patience was indeed a virtue. For me, this highlights the challenges as a black woman of living in two worlds and not entirely inhabiting or being yourself in either. Hooks highlights the need for black women to have spaces to unwind, relax and recover. And she states that walking a tightrope is not good for the soul. In the chapter Living to Love, Hooks highlights how the emotional needs of black women are not always prioritised. She says, in order to know love, we must first learn how to respond to our inner emotional needs. This may mean undoing years of socialisation, where we have been taught that such needs are unimportant. She goes on to quote Keisha Scott, who writes about an early incident in her life that she felt taught her important survival skills as a young black woman. 13 years tall, I stood in the living room doorway. My clothes were wet, my hair was mangled. I was in tears, in shock, and in need of my mother's warm arms. Slowly, she looked me up and down, stood up from the couch and walked towards me. Her body clenched in criticism. Putting her hands on her hips and planting herself, her shadow falling over my face, she asked in a voice of barely suppressed rage, what happened? I flinched, as if struck by the unexpected anger, and answered, they put my head in the toilet. They say I can't swim with them. They were 8 white girls at my high school. I reached out to hold her, but she roughly brushed my hands aside and said, like hell, get your coat, let's go. My mother taught me a powerful, enduring lesson that day. She taught me I would have to fight back against racial and sexual injustice before addressing my own individual emotional needs. For me, this struck a powerful and thought-provoking chord. My final extract is from the last chapter of the book, entitled Walking in the Spirit. Certainly, black women seeking self-recovery are charting new journeys. Although I have read countless self-help books, the vast majority do not acknowledge the existence of black people. It is a new journey for black women to begin to write and talk more openly about aspects of our reality that are not talked about. At times I found writing about some of the issues in this book very saddening, and I would say to Tanya, my comrade, that I felt that writing this book would break my heart. We talked often about why individuals who suffer intensely often cannot find ways to give their anguish words. To speak about certain pain is to remember them, and in the act of remembering them, we are called to relive, to know again much that we would suppress and forget. This book hardly speaks to all that needs to be said, and yet so much of it was hard to say. And sisters have asked me, aren't you afraid that black people will punish you for saying things about black experience they feel should not be said? The purpose of writing this was to add to the growing body of literature that hopes to enable us to value ourselves rightfully and fully. In spiritual solidarity, black women have the potential to be a community of faith that acts collectively to transform our world. When we heal the woundedness inside us, then we attend to the inner love-seeking, love-starved child. We make ourselves ready to enter more fully into community. And it is the experience of community that is crucial to our wellness. Thank you.
Thanks to Lorna Rose. Thanks to Plymouth Art Weekend and the Athenium Theatre in Plymouth. This has been a Chris Summerfield vlog production 2016. You can contact me through ccsPhoto12@hotmail.com. You can sponsor me through PayPal at christopher.summerfield@gmail.com. Thanks for watching the video. It's a lifestyle thing. Be who you want to be. Don't forget, you can order these books directly through Amazon or through Umbola's website, listed here. Thanks to Plymouth Art Weekend and the Athenium Theatre in Plymouth. This has been a Chris Summerfield vlog production 2016. You can contact me through ccsPhoto12@hotmail.com. You can sponsor me through PayPal at christopher.summerfield@gmail.com. Thanks for watching the video. It's a lifestyle thing.